So we've got about half an hour, I think. So I've got some questions here already for the panel that we've pre-canned. So do you want to just do you want to start, Colin, do an intro?
Yeah, so I'm Colin Eberhardt. I'm the CTO at Scott Logic. I've been in this business for about 20 years. And as the CTO, my life has been AI, and more AI for about the past 3 years.
My name's Kirsty Warland. I'm Global Head of IT for Barber, and I've been in IT for just over 20 years and somehow managed to pick up AI for my sins. That's where I'm at.
Great. I'm Ryan Gray, CTO at Marra. Marra, we're low-code experts and AI experts as well.
Welcome. So we're going to do some questions now for about 20 or 30 minutes. I've got some pre-canned questions, I said, and then we're going to open it up to you guys as well. So if you've got questions of me or from them, we'll get to that point as well. And then we'll all be here all evening as well. So first question for Kirsty. Kirsty, what's motivating Barber's IT journey right now? What are you trying to achieve?
So just for context, Barber really, really values the creativity of its designers and humans, basically. So really what we're trying to do is create some space for the folk who've got the really creative brains to be able to do the really creative stuff. So from that perspective, we're not financial services, we're not software engineering. So we're really focusing on that first category that you were talking about before, around having some of that productivity in there, creating that space. We're very clear on the need for us to be able to have our heritage honoured. And by doing that, that means taking folk out for a photo shoot. Now, whilst that generative AI can absolutely do that, you're never going to be able to replicate somebody standing in front of Bamborough on the beach with the wind blowing and all of that aesthetics. So whilst we are using AI in the photo studio to, if somebody's taken the wrong shade of green or whatever, we can touch up with things like that, and that really saves us a lot of time and a lot of effort. But actually, it is just more around that productivity. We are also internal providers to our internal customers globally. So the other side of it is really about getting some of those manual processes into applications really quickly. So we're using AI to generate front-end code so that folk can just literally stop all of the manual spreadsheets. I'm on a very early journey with that. But so that we can just, again, create some better data, because what we've actually recognized is our data's all over the place. It's not in the right state. We've got a long way to go with that. We've tried to do the education. So we're kind of going, right, we need to be able to satisfy some of that hype as well as trying to clean up at the same time. So we're kind of taking a multi-pronged approach.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Colin, if I can come to you. So Colin works a lot with private equity firms and the teams that work with Colin. So private equity firms, how are they viewing Agentic? And what's the key pathway you're seeing for value creation in them?
Cool. I couldn't remember what the question was, so I'm glad it's one I can answer. So I work quite a lot within private equity, specifically organisations that have quite large technology SaaS platform portfolios. So a private equity organisation, for example, might have a portfolio of 50 SaaS organisations. And one of the things that's become more and more prominent within private equity is, given that the most advanced firms are now moving a lot faster with their software engineering, how can we meaningfully accelerate our whole portfolio? So what can we do to help each of our organizations to start significantly increasing their pace of software development? And that's been sort of my day job for the past 6 to 9 months, working that out. So just out of interest, hands up if you work in software or have software within your organization. Yeah, okay, quite a lot of you. There's a lot to tell you about how we achieve this, so I'm going to get to the most simple version of it. So if you're familiar with software development, you're probably familiar with some of the processes and procedures that we operate, whether it's waterfall or agile or scrum or people doing code review and so on. If you look at that, everything that we do is based around the strengths and weaknesses of human beings. It's all so much of it is optimized around the truth or the past truth that code is expensive to create. We're now very rapidly moving into a world where code is actually quite cheap to create through AI models. What that means is that the processes that we've developed around the strengths and weaknesses of human beings, we have to replace them with new processes based around the strengths and weaknesses of AI. And to some of the points that Simon made, it's people keep asking me, oh, what tools are you using? Is it Devon or is it Cursor or is it... It doesn't really matter. It's a bit like saying, which should we use, like a McLaren or a Ferrari or a Lotus? I can guarantee if any of us got into one of those cars and tried to race it around a racetrack, we'd fly off very, very quickly. And it's exactly the same thing here. It doesn't really matter what tools you're using. It's more about how you change your organization and change the people around those tools to capitalize on them. So there's a lot more I could say, but I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Colin. So Ryan, question for you. Why is enabling people and business users just as critical to success as the technology itself?
Bringing people along on the journey, it should really start with things like good user-centered design, making sure that we're thinking about how the people are going to use the system that we're going to build. We also want to think about how to measure the thing that we're going to build or the platform that we're going to bring in. The reason for this is that we can then show that it's actually making those people's lives easier or worse. Another thing to think about with why we really need to think about people when introducing these platforms is that there's a tendency, because of where AI has initiated and started, that everybody in software development departments and IT departments, it's kind of our bread and butter. We hear about this every single day, and it's very natural for us to upskill in these things. For people within other departments, such as finance, HR, legal, in these departments, people have their heads down, continuously trying to get more done with less. Budgets are continuously slashed, and people have to do more and more work, but they themselves don't have the remit and often don't have the time carved out to do the upskilling that's required and to learn how to use the new tools. Simon mentioned earlier the cultural shift that's required as well, the different ways of thinking and what that might mean for graduates as well. So we really need to think about carving out that time for people within business departments.
Yeah, something I want to add there, I think you mentioned it in your introduction around the media perception is of AI creates job loss. And I don't believe that to be true. I think for the most people, they're not going to lose their jobs. But just telling them that is only telling them half of the truth as well. For a lot of people, their jobs are going to change quite fundamentally. And you have to understand that whilst that's not quite as painful as losing your job, that can still be really quite painful. In the work we're doing in accelerating software development, in the projects that we're working on now, human beings aren't writing the code anymore. And there are a lot of people who take a great amount of joy and satisfaction from writing code. And that's a painful transition. And that will play out in all kinds of job families and job functions.
Good, thank you. And so, Kirsty, question for you. So in terms of going on your own journey within Barbara and stuff, have you worked with partners and brought other people into the mix?
Yeah, I think, because we are quite early in the journey anyway, what we've decided to do is look across our existing supplier and partner landscape anyway, and really leverage what's already built into systems first and foremost, rather than try and building something ourselves. Because we don't have the learning that others have had, we're a little bit further behind on the learning journey. So why reinvent the wheel? Why not learn from others? So the beauty about working with some of the partners that we've been working with is, they're sharing the information. They're trying to help us create a bit more of a sustainable approach so that we're taking the learning on board as well, without having to go through the pain of learning the nuts and bolts. And when I'm saying about taking the learning on board, it is about so that we can move forward, not so we can learn what's happened behind us. But also, why make the same mistakes as everybody else when we can avoid doing that? So the partners really help us kind of think about what it is that we need to do differently. I think the danger that I have seen with some of our suppliers of our existing software is they're very keen to push their version on you. Yeah, Darren's nodding. And I think it's about being purposeful and looking at where it's adding the real value. You know, we were in a session recently where that very thing happened, and you come away from it going, yeah, but what's the value for the business? So I think it is about being really selective. But, you know, attending lots of things like this has been a massive learning journey for me and my colleagues as well, because it isn't just me coming to these types of events. They're going out and they're coming back in and learning about it. And that's the beauty of working with some partners as well, because you get some exposure to different domains and different thinking. And I think that's really working well for us.
I think that, I mean, my experience as well is it's like everything's changing all at once, all at the same time. It's like, and most organisations, you know, even us, we're feeling our way through it a bit, and that's why I think you need to have kind of like a growth mindset, or being open to taking some risks, don't you, and kind of innovating, trying new ideas.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about risks, I suppose, later on, but I think it is about balancing that, you know, the value with the risks, and especially when you're a brand like Barbour, where, you know, that intellectual property is really, that's so valuable to this organisation that we can't really afford to make some of those mistakes and allow, you know, Spring Summer 27 is what we're promoting at the moment. We can't allow those designs to eke out.
Yeah.
And that's the danger that we have if we don't put a little bit of control around things.
Well, the problem is this technology is only about 3 years old. And typically when you're looking for help, you want someone who's got 10 years experience, whether it's an individual or a partner, and that's not going to happen. So I'd say if you're looking for a partner and they're incredibly confident, you've probably got the wrong partner. Most people have only done this once or twice before, or have never done it. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not a good partner, but you want one that's got the honesty to say, we think we can do it, but let's be honest, it's the first time we've done it. The technology was only invented 6 months ago. Let's work this out together.
All right, so sticking with you, Colin, from the work we've done with early adopters, what do you think some of the key lessons that we've learned?
A big lesson is I think you have to have willingness to change, or you're not going to get the really transformative results. So in the work I've been doing with SDLC transformation, we've talked to a few organisations where we know what it is they need to change, but they don't feel confident in making that change, or they don't have buy-in. And then we basically say, well, we're not going to be able to achieve transformative results, and we move on to a different organisation. And understandably, some organisations aren't in a position where they can take on that form of transformation, because as I said, you mentioned with the SDLC. So taking a step back, AI can generate code really, really fast. In most organizations, the speed at which human beings are typing on a keyboard and creating code is not the limiting factor. The limiting factors are typically the ability to test, evaluate, and deploy, or even their ability to actually articulate what it is they want the engineers to build. So for us to be successful in accelerating the whole end-to-end process, we need to find out where the blockers are, and we need the client to give us permission to address those blockers. And again, sometimes that can be quite hard.
And do you want to? I mean, it's publicly available, the case study. But do you want to share some of the stats, some of the numbers?
Yeah. So we've just completed our first 2 projects. One with an organisation called Scope Visio, which is a German ERP platform provider, and the other is Yuki, which is a Rotterdam-based platform, a SaaS platform for finance and financial controllers within organisations. Both of them had software migration projects underway. Scope Visio, at the end of that engagement, they're now moving 3 times faster on that backlog of migration. And as I mentioned, the way of working is radically different. As I said, human beings aren't writing the code anymore. A lot of the work we put in place was not teaching them how to use AI and write code faster. A lot of what we were doing was creating a safety net, a really comprehensive test suite that allows you to write code rapidly with AI, but test and validate. So not only are we moving 3 times faster, we've actually reduced the number of bugs being produced as they go from one story to the next. Yuki, the other organisation, they're moving 1.7 times faster as a result of the work that we did. So yeah,
and that's a massive saving, that one as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so they calculate that that's saving them around about 350,000 euros on that migration. As the learnings propagate out into other teams, their projected savings is around about 450,000 euros this year, and they believe over a 3-year time period it's going to accumulate to about 1.5 million saving. Software is on the bleeding edge of transformation. Our business is being disrupted far faster than any others. But when I look at other processes within most organizations, there's so much inefficiency that to a certain extent, I mean, most people won't tell you this, but AI can be a forcing function for making the changes that should have been made a long time ago. There are loads of business processes that haven't been designed. They're there, they happen. You can use AI as a forcing function to redesign processes that should have been redesigned years ago or should have been designed in the first place.
And I think just building on what Colin said about the speed of legacy migration onto new platforms and new technologies, it's quicker, faster than it was before, and it's cheaper than it was before. So the conversation with the CFO changes. So whereas before it might be, look, I need £2 million in 2 years to do this transformation of a legacy system. Now it's like half that time and a quarter of the money. It's a different CFO question than it was previously. So there is a lot more opportunity to kind of like legacy rewrites as well. Right, so I'm going to open up in a minute, but before we do, the last question to you, Ryan. So one of the things, one of the themes we're talking about is obviously co-working tools in particular, and how that enables a lot of innovation and efficiency around here. How do you get those tools out of in a safe way, get them out of IT and into the hands of kind of business folks and business functions?
Yeah, so I think one of the things to think about here is doing this with IT, so not moving it away from IT. So guardrails and safety was mentioned earlier. So one of the things that we're currently doing at Marra, partnering with Scott Logic to introduce the Claude co-work platform into a few of the business departments. And we're starting to think about that using 4 pillars. So there is setup. That's how you set up the platform safely and securely, so that it's in a good place and position to be used by the users, that they can't make mistakes in it. The second is upskilling. So if you don't upskill people to know how to use these tools, how LLMs work, what they can trust, what they can verify, then you're not setting up the business department or the users for success. Third is tailoring the system or the platform. So this is where you try and take the tooling and you start to make it more pointed at the tasks that department actually have. So what is it that looks co-workable in that department? Those things tend to be things that start with and end with one person. It's something that they do repeatedly. So perhaps they're doing it every Monday or the beginning of every day. And it's something that tends not to be something that happens across departments. It's not one of the big, complicated, gnarly processes, which is where everybody's heads go to at first when you start thinking about what to point AI at. So once you've tailored the platform, that makes it a lot more usable. And then there is measure, which is the last pillar. So really important to take a baseline, like of the business department's KPIs, key performance indicators, before starting, so that you can snapshot after you've introduced the department as well. It's really good to start with the metrics and KPIs that the department are already using, like not setting up some new form of measurement. This means that you can just see, like, the things that are already measuring, do those things change over time? You also come up with some new metrics. So run some workshops with those business users to figure out, like, what are the tasks that you're going to use this this co-work platform on, and then start measuring the amount of time that people spend on those particular tasks. Try and take a baseline before you do that. And the reason that those pillars, like, in doing those things, like, helps to move that, like, out of the hands of IT and into the hands of the business users is that if you've upskilled the business users in how to use these platforms, they then reach for the platform. If you don't set up a platform and give them access to something, you're going to introduce shadow IT. The reason that happens is that they're going to want to use these tools. So they're going to use something. So you have to put the guardrails in place and set up the platform of choice for your organisation.
All right. Well, thank you very much to our panel. Thank you.